Bibliophiles of the internet, we somehow find ourselves past the halfway point of the year, which means it's finally time to do the mid-year check-in tag. Also, gentle reminder to my fellow content creators, but our disabled friends in the book community have reminded us many times that the original name of this tag is ableist. So if you can change it to check-in going forwards, that's actually a very low lift and the least we can do to make our content safe. That said, I'm pretty sure the original version of this tag no longer exists on YouTube. It's kind of become an amalgamation of people taking out and adding in different questions every single year. I have modified the base questions I was able to find based off the prompts I saw in Angela's video and also Bezi's Instagram post, both of which I will have linked down below. I also really love how Alex put his spin on this video by adding in questions from Leandra's mid-year calm down tag. I will link both Alex and Leandra's videos down below as well, and I've added a few of those questions in at the end as a nice way to sort of wrap things up. But let's get into it. Question number 1, how has your reading year gone so far? I would actually say in terms of both quantity and quality, it's been a pretty good reading year so far. In fact, it's been a little bit bonkers because I'm way ahead of the reading pace I set last year. I am so far ahead in terms of how many books I've read compared to this same time last year. And honestly, it's kind of scary because I'm not doing it on purpose. I've said some iteration of this many times before, but I'm not super concerned with exactly how many books I read per year as long as I'm being fulfilled by what I'm reading in some way. But looking back at the past few years, a normal reading month for me has typically been somewhere between 8 and 10 books, and so far there has not been a single month in 2025 where I have read less than 10 books. I'm not trying to jinx myself, I'm not putting a moral value on that observation, I'm just saying that I am very aware that 2025 is not a normal year for me in more ways than one. And I've read a lot of really fantastic books as well. I've started and completed series, I've found new favorite authors to come back to, there have been incredible standouts for me every single month so far, so I am not complaining by any means. Question number 2, what is the best book you've read so far in 2025? As a Libra, I find this question absolutely devastating, but I will be very brave and say The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami because I read a galley back in January and I'm still thinking about it more than 6 months after the fact. This is a somewhat dystopian story set in the near future that also employs speculative elements. It's about a Moroccan-American character named Sarah who's just landed in LAX after being abroad for work, and that's when she is suddenly detained by the Risk Assessment Administration, which has flagged her dream data as being high risk. In this version of the future, corporations and third-party companies have developed algorithms that actively collect data from people's dreams, and if someone's dreams portray violence or instability of any kind, those people can be seized and sent to detainment centers for a minimum of 21 days. But Sarah's stay at the retention center is extended from 21 days to months and eventually years, and she is desperate to somehow regain the freedom that she so easily lost. Like I said when I first reviewed this book back in January, it is both horrifying and horrifyingly timely and only becoming even more and more relevant with each passing day. Yes, the technology this story imagines is fictional, but we already live in a world where people are not only unjustly detained with no recourse to regain their freedom, but in a world where algorithms, artificial intelligence, and untested forms of technology are making irreversible decisions about people's lives. And what really struck me about this book is how Sarah recognizes that she is going to be punished whether she steps outside the lines or not. That is simply how the system works. So the pivotal moment comes when she realizes that she's already willingly given so much of herself away to the system in hopes of making herself seem docile and obedient. But if it doesn't make a difference, then the system and powers that be don't get to have those parts of herself anymore. She is going to make herself into the outlier that the algorithm could never predict. Yes, this is a harrowing story at times, and again speaks to the bleak reality that so many immigrants especially are grappling with in this political moment, but it's also powerful and a hopeful story about reclaiming the truth of yourself. Question number 3, what is the best sequel you've read so far in 2025? I think I've actually read a decent amount of sequels, so there's a lot to choose from. I have to give honorable mentions to Those Beyond the Wall and Flight of the Fallen, but I think I have to give this one to The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh by Claudia Gray. This is the third book in the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney mystery series. It's a historical murder mystery series that involves all the characters in the Jane Austen canon, but actually follows 2 original characters, Juliet, daughter of the Tilneys, Louise and Jonathan, son of the Darcys. The two of them keep ending up in situations where dead bodies turn up, and they figured out that they work well together to gather clues and figure out who the culprit truly is. This third book was such a fun installment in the series because it puts a really creative twist on that familiar murder mystery formula where the victim, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, is actually still alive and fears being targeted by an assassin. So Jonathan and Juliet have to uncover the would-be murderer before they can actually succeed in their attempts. Every time I dive into this series, I have such a great time. The audiobooks are phenomenal as well, and I cannot wait to listen to the recently released fourth book in the series. Question number 4. What's a book that made you laugh? This is actually a really great question, and I think it's nice to spotlight stories that bring us quantifiable joy and inspire full-bodied reactions from us. Humor is a tremendous quality for a story to have, and I think this would have to be a tie between Love at Second Sight by F.T. Lukens and Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. F.T. Lukens is just a master of queer satirical fantasy stories. They always populate their stories with endearing friend groups that they put in absolutely ridiculous situations. So it's pretty much guaranteed that I will be smiling ear to ear and laughing out loud when I read an F.T. Lukens book. Of Monsters and Mainframes is also a satirical queer sci-fi story, and I found it to be incredibly amusing and endearing because it's told from such an unexpected and unusual point of view. The main character in this story is a supercomputer-powered spaceship, and because she doesn't have a body, she's very limited in what she can do and has to find a lot of creative solutions to hunting down stowaway monsters in space. On the flip side of that, question number 5, what's a book that made you cry? I begrudgingly have to give this to Futbolista by Johnny Cazavilla, which is ironic because I could have very easily used it for the last question because it definitely has so many chaotic laugh-out-loud moments. But as a queer Mexican-American, any scene involving Mexican parents loving on their queer kids and supporting them is always going to hit differently and take me to a deeply personal place. Question number 6. What is a new release you haven't read yet but want to? Of course, there are so many to choose from, but I think this would have to be Notes from a Regicide by Isaac Fellman. I really loved Isaac's debut, Dead Collections. I thought it was so strange and unique and thoughtful, and I've been eagerly waiting almost 3 years to see what they might write next, and even though I fully have the means to read what it is they've written next, I just have not found time to read it. Question number 7. What is your most anticipated book for the second half of the year? Funny you should ask. I actually recently made a video where I go through some of my most anticipated queer book releases for the rest of 2025 and even into early 2026. I will link that down below, of course, but pulling from that list, I think it would very easily have to be You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is Andrew's adult horror debut coming out in September. He has gone on record many times saying that this is the grossest, most disgusting, most disturbing thing he's published to date, and I just know I'm gonna fuck with it so much. I know it's about an invasion of sentient worms and a trans autistic man who lives within a hive of these worms, and also the fact that he is forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy to term for the quote-unquote betterment of the hive. And honestly, that is all I need to know. Question number 8. What was your biggest disappointment of the year so far? I'm not going to talk this one to death, but I think that would very easily be Kiss Me Maybe by Gabriela Gamez. As I said in my April wrap-up, I believe there is so much about this story on paper that should absolutely make it my kind of book. It's following sapphic Latina characters, one of whom is demisexual, and really grappling with her ace identity as she tries to find romance. But while I found those in-depth conversations about asexuality, labels, and microlabels to be incredibly important, the characters themselves just turned out to be flat, the romance was one-dimensional, and the central plot point promised in the synopsis turned out to be a huge gimmick. As much as I appreciate the rep, the story just doesn't have very many redeeming qualities outside of that. Question number 9. Which book has been the biggest surprise? Again, there are so many books I could mention here, but just based off my history with this author, I think I have to give this one to Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. Cassandra Clare obviously has spent a majority of her career writing within the Shadowhunters world, which is a world that I simply have no connection to or interest in. So I was very intrigued when I heard that she was trying her hand at adult fantasy for the first time, and it would be her first time writing something entirely separate from the Shadowhunters series. As a 600+ page series opener from an author whose work has not connected with me in the past, reading this was a huge leap of faith on my part. And I actually ended up enjoying it so much. In fact, I'm actively looking forward to continuing the series. Question number 10. Who is your favorite new author, either new to you or debut? Without question, this has to be Marissa Crane. I read both of their currently published books in May as part of an author taste test vlog, and both of those books absolutely fucked me up. I just fell in love with the raw, poetic, energized cadence of their prose. Both of those books made me feel acutely alive in incredibly different ways. Something about this author's writing is just electric and undeniable, and I cannot wait to see what they do next. Question number 11. What's one book you would like to read before the end of the year? There are two books in particular that have been on my internal list of priority books every single month for the past 6 or 7 months, and I still have not read them yet. Those are Metal from Heaven by August Clark, which is pitched as Gideon the Ninth meets the Princess Bride in a bloody lesbian revenge tale set against the backdrop of simmering class warfare. And there is not a single thing, a single word in that description that I don't love. And the other is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong, which is a dark academia fantasy story about the first ever woman admitted to a prestigious order of mages who unravels a secret conspiracy that could threaten the existence of magic itself. Yes, there will always be more books I have not read compared to what I have read, and trust me, that's a very hard pill to swallow, but these two specifically have really been haunting me, and I would like to read them before 2026. Question number 12. Any upcoming videos you're excited to make? Actually, yes. Because the second quarter of the year has recently concluded, I now get to work on my second quarter reading stats video, and those are always some of my favorite videos to make. I love diving into the spreadsheets, talking about page count and most read genres, how much money I saved at the library, which book cover colors were the most popular, etc. So you can look forward to that fairly soon. As we start to close out here, these last 3 questions are from the mid-year calm down tag, as I mentioned before, starting with what's a book you read in 2025 that you really needed? I think this is a really great question, and there have been some tremendous books I've read so far this year that really blew me away, but I think the one that really lends itself to this question is So Many Stars by Guero de Robertes. As the subtitle says, this is an oral history of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit people of color. It's a transcription of oral interviews that the author conducted with queer and trans BIPOC folks, especially those we would consider to be queer and trans elders. And it's just a record of their lived experiences and also their wisdom that they have to pass along to upcoming generations. I said this in my June wrap-up, but the fact that this book is an oral history is so special and so meaningful because it gives these elders space to describe themselves and their experiences in their own words, and it feels as if they're directly speaking to the audience. And especially in this political moment where trans lives are being threatened and endangered by legislature, I just really needed to hear those stories and those voices as they talk about persevering and persisting against tremendous odds. Question number 14. What's a book that energized you? This is another really fantastic question, and oddly enough, as I was going over the 80 or so books I've read up to this point, a lot of the titles on the shortlist for this answer were actually nonfiction books, but I think the one that's going to beat everyone else out is Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Amoja Noble. The author was inspired to start this research when she noticed that the autocomplete suggestions when it came to Googling information about Black women specifically were increasingly derogatory and demeaning in nature. And that caused her to want to research how Google and other commercial search engines prioritize their results and what kind of human biases and prejudices are inherently built into these information systems that we increasingly rely upon to a deeply troubling degree. This research is so incredibly worthwhile, and I learned so much about the dangers of relying on commercial search engine results as our primary information sources, and why it's important to question what kind of information is made most readily available to us, and who gets to decide not just what we do see, but what we don't see. I know those conversations can seem very scary and heavy, but this book definitely energized me to be more aware of the information I'm taking in and where it comes from, which is increasingly important in this age of AI search results and disinformation. And lastly, question number 15. Are there any anticipated books or book events that you're still looking forward to in 2025? Now, I already talked about anticipated releases, but I wanted to end with a little preview of an upcoming event by saying that I'm going to be moderating a very cool author/book event in early August. It should actually be announced by the time you see this, so I will just let you know that it's going to be an Instagram Live where me and Aiden are going to be back at it again, not only talking about the upcoming paperback release of Cemetery Boys, finally, but also giving a little preview for the sequel, Espiritu, coming in 2026. It's gonna be very fucking cool, to say the very least, and I hope you get a chance to tune in. So those are all the questions for this mishmashed version of the mid-year check-in tag. If you have any burning answers to any of these questions, feel free to drop drop them down below in the comments, or feel free to share about your favorite book that you've read so far in 2025. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself and others, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.